a double delight for today because I get to introduce a really another really nationally, internationally renowned whistleblower, human rights advocate, and a person who took on the Department of Justice, United States Marshal Service, and won in, I believe it was 1996, 1986. Okay, 1998. This is Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Matthew Fogg. And in 1998, he won a $4 million judgment against the powerful Department of Justice when he took the U.S. Marshal Service on in the blue code of silence, and he exposed the rampant race discrimination and victimization of the U.S. Marshal Service of their own. So you can imagine what they're doing to us if they're prepared to victimize their own. And he took on that kind of powerful force and won. And he's going to be telling you about a lot of his exploits, and he's a dynamic speaker, so I'm sure you'll love him. Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Matthew Fogg.
Thank you very much, Zena. And for you guys who may not know Zena as well, she's also has taken on the system in Indiana and around the country, dealing with various issues when it comes down to victims' rights and what people have a right to do and stand up to. And Zena's, of course, she's an accomplished lawyer. She's she says she's a really, really good trial lawyer. And so I just want to say that about her. But myself, I always like to just start with a small prayer. Lord, may the words of my mouth, meditations of my heart be accepted in thy sight. For you are my strength and my redeemer. Amen. I know that I want to say to everybody here, you know, we're standing here between the monument and the United States Capitol. This is where I grew up at. I grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C. I have an identical twin brother, so if some of you see me out there and speak to me and I don't speak, it might be my twin brother. But I grew up here in Washington, D.C. I came up at the time when the civil rights movement was in full swing, when the marches on Washington and so forth. So there was a side of me that I got a chance to be a part of that and made me say, how can I make a difference? And I always remembered one time when I was a young kid and I couldn't get in the boys club because at that time we had the Jim Crow laws here in Washington, D.C., so I couldn't get in the boys club. And so I ran home to my mother, and I didn't understand why when I tried to go in with my friends and they turned me back. And my mom, she started crying and she looked at me and she said, son, there are laws on the books sometimes, and you have to, these laws are, sometimes they're ungodly, but we have to stand up to these laws. And ultimately, she looked at me, and I'm this young kid, and she turned and she said, maybe one day you'll make a difference. I had no idea what that meant until I started growing up and I went away to college and I started seeing things. Once that happened and I started getting a chance to understand how the system does work, I realized that it takes advocates, it takes folks to sometimes stand up for what is right, even though you may know that when you take that stand, there's a chance that it may affect you, your family, your career, everything. But should you turn your head? And one of the things that I've learned in law enforcement real fast after I got on that job, that sometimes you might see police brutality in its full force. You might see law enforcement officers doing things that you know are not right, and you can see there and you see them doing this thing, and you make a decision right there. And it's what we call the good old boy network. It is whether or not I'm going to decide to speak out, or do I turn my head and I go along with the program. But I had to stop and remember and think about it. That person that they're whooping or they're beating or doing these things to, that could be somebody that I care about, or somebody that I love, or somebody in my family. And it could go on and on and on. But a lot of people would say to us, and we had this code of silence, and they come up to me, hey, Fogg, why are you concerned about it? It's not your child. It wasn't you. You know, and they say, look, we choked the guy out and we killed him because he was resisting arrest. Well, that's because the dog was biting his leg. That was because you was choking him out and he was just trying to get some air. But these are the things that when you begin to understand what your call is in life. And when I look at this situation, I look at about what we're here talking about, the rights of young children and the rights of families and people that have children, and why does this system operate in the manner that it does? It operates like that because there's an old saying, when good people do nothing, evil thrives. And that's what we have. And when we look around here today and we look at this lawn should be full right now of people. But a lot of folks are waiting and standing back and watching. But let me tell you something, as soon as it happens to them or their child or somebody that they know, all of a sudden they're gonna want everybody to rally around them. And sometimes that's when you say, hey, look, the chickens are coming home to roost. And what we have to begin to understand, we talk about justice and justice for all. We gotta be honest with ourselves. It's like going into an AA program or any other program when you talk about being honest with yourself. One of the things we know, there is a legacy in this country. And we know that legacy in this country has, when we look at slavery and we look at things that occurred in America, we gotta be honest and we gotta say, we did some terrible things in our history. It was not, if you ever understood what just that alone, just slavery and what it meant, the degradation, I've always liked the picture when I look at the picture because it hits me from my soul when you see the part where the woman is crying for her child and they're taking her child to sell her child away. Well, when we say that, it's us here, and we say here in America, am I talking too loud? Oh, okay. And here in America, we say there is a legacy of some things that are done that are not right. And there are people that are called to stand up for justice. There are people that are called to stand up for what is right. You are that person. You may look at the other person and say, well, that's not me, I can't do it. You don't know the folks that when I decided in my agency to stand up for what was right, many people liked me. They said, Fogg, look, you got a great career in front of you. You're a good guy, man. You articulate, you speak well, you are just, you're fair. Don't get hung up on the rights of others, man. Take care of you. And I always remember they were telling me that. They didn't want to see me take on the fight because everybody knows when you take on the fight, all of a sudden you become a big target. But I put on that badge because I swore to serve and protect the community. I swore to serve and protect you. And that meant righteousness and justice for you. And so I had to stand up and I had to decide, do I go along with the good old boy network? Do I go along with the program or do I speak out? Some of you that are sitting here that has seen justice evade or elude you, and you sit here and you say, look, I've seen it now, I'm coming to speak out. Well, it was always that way. It was always that. I always say one of the things about justice is you always have to have oversight on oversight on oversight. Because as soon as you set up a program that's designed to give us protection, somebody, some way or another, corruption is going to set in that program. And you're going to need something else to come along to oversee that. I call it the mutating germ effect. It's the mutating germ effect. Whenever you try to fix something, and I watched it in law enforcement agencies, we try to stop this brutality, or we try to stop this thing where citizens can feel like they really are protected, they really are safe. You will still get somewhere, you'll get some officers or somebody come in that are corrupt, and they'll come in, and before you know it, they'll begin to infest the whole system. And nobody wants to challenge that person. It says, listen, you are wrong. This isn't right what we're doing. Well, the same thing with child services and community services. We see what's happening to these children a lot of times. A lot of them are just thrown away, thrown to the side. And people sit back, it's not my child, so why should I be concerned? What we're saying out here today is you need to be concerned because the children are our future. And the children are watching what we're doing. And if we're not protecting them, where do we land? How do we stand up to anything? So when I decided to step forward, they told me, they said, Fogg, don't do it, stay back. But I didn't do it, and I went forward. Now, had I known, I'm gonna tell you something. It took 23 years from the time that I first filed a complaint and going through that whole system. And what I learned in that was this. Sometimes people say it's just a few bad apples. You know, it's one person or two people that did this. It wasn't the whole system. But if the system protects those few bad apples, what does that make the system? If it protects them and collaborates with them, and it stretches that thing out to a point to where now you're going into 5 to 10 years, what does that tell you about the system?
And so someone has to understand that.